Cynthia Hughes was an only child being raised by her single mother in a modest suburb of Detroit. She was a young woman gifted and troubled in equal measure. She did well in her classes when she wanted to, but mostly she found it hard to focus. More precisely, she found it hard to care. No one was sure if Cynthia had fallen in with a bad crowd at school that year or was acting out on her own, but she was arrested on Devil's Night for graffiti, smashing store windows, and other petty acts of vandalism. In this neighborhood, Devil's Night was the traditional night for mischief. Due to her clean record and good grades, Cynthia was let go without any permanent repercussion over the incident. And that should have been that. Except, the following year, in the days leading up to Devil's Night, Cynthia's mother found a stash of suspicious gear hidden in her daughter's room. It seemed that Cynthia was planning on going a lot bigger than the year before. She was even planning some fires. Her mother was beside herself. Cynthia was all that she had, and she couldn't bear to let her go astray. Especially not after what had happened with her dad. So she called her reverend, who paid a visit to a parishioner who was a police detective. And that man was able to pull some strings, which is how, on Devil's Night, 1993, 14-year-old Cynthia Hughes found herself in the back of a police car. Instead of being out running the streets, she would be cruising those streets with two uniformed officers. Officers that had been given the mandate to break up the very same kind of vandalism that Cynthia had committed. All so that she could watch, hopefully learn. Her mother prayed that maybe, just maybe, seeing things from the other side would scare the girl straight. Little did she know, it might just scare her straight to hell. This is the story of Cynthia Hughes and her Devil's Night ride-along. Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem, killers, cannibals, and cults, fearful fiction and furious fact, tall tales, and terrible truths. This is a scary home companion. Officer Gibson was driving. Officer Morton was shotgun. They were both smoking and talking about the Pistons. Cynthia was sulking in the back seat, pushed way up into the corner, staring out the window with slow simmering contempt. She hated this town, this place, her school, her dad, her home, that bullshit church she had to go to. She hated it all. In actuality, Cynthia had no desire to cause harm to any person. She was just so full of rage, didn't know what else to do with it, so striking back against this stupid town seemed like a great place to start. The police radio hissed, squelched, and chattered.
Car 71, backup request from car 453, store fire at A1 Video. Please respond.
The cops tossed their cigarettes and shifted in their seats like a supervisor had just started watching them, and they hit the red and blues. It was close, just 3 blocks down, 2 streets over. A1 Video. A video processing shop that was located in between a massage parlor and another massage parlor. The whole way there, the cops were goofing on what kind of films they must process there. They stopped laughing abruptly as they saw the store engulfed in flames, and two other officers sprawled out prone in the street. Gibson and Morton grabbed their guns and jumped out of the squad car, advancing quickly and calling the downed officers by their first names. These were men they knew, men they saw every day. Cynthia inched into the middle of the back seat and stared through the wire, through the windshield, through the flickering firelight. She was breathless as the two cops advanced slowly, very slowly now. The radio hissed and squelched and chattered again.
1018 all cars, report back to the precinct immediately. This is a code Crimson. Repeat, a code Crimson has been issued for our precinct. Return to home base immediately.
Officer Gibson got onto one knee to check pulses, while Officer Morton carefully watched his back. Gibson shook his head, and when he pulled his hand away from the man's neck, it was coated in red. Cynthia saw a shadow pulling away from a wall next to that burning shop. It was dark, it was fast, coming in low, and it wasn't until the shadow was on top of Morton's back that she realized it was a man. Thin, wiry, and impossibly fast. So fast that Cynthia didn't even realize he had slid a knife into that cop's ear and through the meat of his brain. She didn't realize it until she saw him pulling it free. Officer Gibson got to his feet and raised his gun, but this man, this lightning-quick shadow man, was way too far ahead of him. Even as he yanked the bloody knife free, the man was sliding his other arm under Morton's armpit, down the length of his arm, and plucking the gun from his still twitching fingers. The cop was in place as a perfect human shield, and the hammer of his gun was already cocked. The man shot Officer Gibson between the eyes, and both partners hit the pavement at the same time. The killer quickly stripped them of their guns, keys, and belts, and it was only then that he glanced through the windshield and looked right into Cynthia's eyes. She was still holding her breath because only seconds had elapsed. Y'all don't believe me, I say this cat was fast, but he was fast. But not now. Now he was lazily walking through the blazing white headlights, giving Cynthia a quick but much better look at him. He was a geek. Full stop. He looked like the sort of guy that runs carnival rides. Gawky, awkward, all angles and edges and bones, with a very unfortunate snaggletooth poking out of one side of his lip, holding it up. And there appeared to be a fledgling attempt at a ginger mullet tickling the back of his neck. He was wearing an olive drab vest over a ratty t-shirt, and this vest had been customized, lined with sheaths, full of a dozen different blades down each side of his pigeon chest. A minute ago, hell, 30 seconds ago, Cynthia might have written this man off as a yokel. But now she was staring at him in pure panic, because he was death incarnate. The pale horse the blood terminus of her short and miserable life. And he was walking right towards her. She tried the doors on both sides and then dug her fingertips into the wire mesh. No dice. She was locked down tight. The killer slid behind the wheel. He set the guns and the belts and 2 other guns she hadn't seen before on the seat next to him. He adjusted the steering wheel and he slid the seat forward. And then finally, he turned around and looked at Cynthia. And he smiled. "Hi, I'm Danny." Cynthia was still holding her breath. "What's your name?" Danny, the killer, asked her. "Cynthia," she whispered. "Cynthia? Are you rich? That sounds like a rich person's name." She shook her head. Danny put the car into gear and carefully steered it around all the dead cops, and they were on their way. Danny was looking a little bashful. "Listen, Cynthia, can I ask you something? Can you read?" And she nodded. "Oh, that's a relief. Because Albert, he's at the bar. He said he didn't want to work tonight. He's mad about, something about men in suits bossing us around too much. I don't know anybody who wears a suit, but that's Albert for you, you know?" "Oh, wait. You don't know Albert. Do you know Albert?" No, I don't think so." "Well, you would remember him if you did. Everyone remembers Albert. Anyway, Albert usually drives, and he remembers where we have to go and what we have to do and who we have to see. I'm not good at that stuff. You can read. You said you could read, right?" She nodded again. Danny pressed his wrist against the wire mesh. She could read a series of addresses that had been written on it in ballpoint pen. The first address was scratched out. The second address she recognized. They were driving away from it. She read the third address out loud. "Okay, yeah, that sounds right. Can you tell me how to get there?" Cynthia didn't make a conscious decision so clearly delineated as, "Okay, I'm going to help this psycho now." But bear in mind she had little choice. This is a teenage girl, trapped in a cop car, scared, half out of her mind, at the mercy of a killer. Of course she gave him directions. She had no other hand to play. She guided Danny to the edge of the neighborhood, past the big church, and to the small, modest 2-story preacher's house set further back on the property. Danny parked, cut the lights, and watched the house for a few minutes. "Why are we here?" she asked. "Because you said it's the right address." "No, I mean, what are we doing here?" "Oh, this man who lives here, he's a bad man, and I have to go make him stop being bad." He opened the door. "Wait here, okay? Can I get you anything while I'm in there?" She shook her head. For a second, Danny looked almost sad. You don't have to be scared, Cynthia. I'm not like them. I'm not like this guy in here. I don't do stuff to kids, okay? That's why I need your help to make them stop. He slammed the door. She didn't see him walking away. He just sort of dissolved into the shadows and wasn't there anymore. She worked on that wire screen again. There was a little sliding panel set in the middle of it, but those two asshole cops kept it locked for the entire ride along. The radio squelched again.
Car 453, car 71, car 229. Please respond. Come on, boys. I hope you're just out there somewhere drunk again. I won't even be mad. Just call in. We all just need to know that you're okay. I repeat, this is a code crimson. You have to come home. Please.
From inside the preacher's house came a single, piercing scream. The screech of a man experiencing sudden and indescribable pain. And then silence. House lights turned on and then off again. A few minutes passed. And then she saw Danny strolling back towards the car. He was cradling something small but bulky under each of his arms. He opened the door, and under the dome light, she saw that his vest was spattered with fresh blood. A thick, red smear ran down the right side of his face, clotting in his sideburn. But he did not seem to notice any of that. He was fully focused on his bounty, which he tossed down into the front seat. Family-sized bags of Ruffles, Funyuns, and Doritos. Can you believe it? He had chips! Danny unlocked the slider in the screen and let Cynthia have her pick. And they sat for a while, just munching chips. I should have gotten something to drink. Maybe at the next place. Read this for me. He slid his wrist into the back seat, and Cynthia read the fourth of the 5 addresses. Aside from the crispity crunching, neither of them made a peep. Not until they drove into the hospital parking lot and found a spot. Danny reflected. These might be the best chips that I have ever had. Are dead man's chips a thing? Is that a thing? Cynthia ate another chip. It should be a thing. These are really good chips. There was a brief pause, and then she continued that same sort of light tone, trying to keep it friendly between them, and she asked, Danny, you said that you don't hurt kids. That preacher back there, are you saying that he does? The killer nodded. Then he paused, and then he shook his head. Yes. Well, no. He used to, but not anymore. Did you kill him? Yeah, yep, yeah. I mean, I can't say that. I don't like to use the K word or the M word either. Albert says it's best not to say those words out loud, you know? There's always too much for me to remember. It's hard without Albert here to remind me. Like, I was in there, and I was about to be done with it, and it was going to be very easy, and then I remembered what Albert always says. He says, you have to make a statement. Has he ever said that to you? You know how he is. You have to make a statement. Wait. You don't know about making a statement, do you? See, sometimes you have to tell a lot of people the same thing. But you can't use words. You have to do something that everyone will hear about and everyone will see, and then it's going to make them look at each other and say, holy bejabbers, I'm never doing that. Look at what happened to that guy. Cynthia said. What did you do, Danny? Well, pardon my French, but I sort of cut off his, his thing. And then I stuck it in his mouth because, if anything, that should send a message, right? What's wrong? You don't like your chips? She handed the bag over to him, murmuring, No, it's okay. I'm full. You can have the rest. Wow, thanks. He opened the door. I'll be right back, and then we're almost done. I promise. Thanks, Cynthia. You're a real lifesaver. I kind of feel like we've known each other a long time, don't you? She tried to smile at him, but just couldn't find it in her. Didn't seem to matter to Danny. He scampered off into the darkness and was gone once again. As soon as she thought the coast was clear, she tried to slip through that open panel, but she could only fit her head and her arm through. It wasn't enough to get away, but it was enough to grab the radio handset from the dash. Hello? Dispatch. Dispatch, please. I'm in a police car with a man, and he killed the cops. They're dead, and I don't know what to do. There was a long moment of silence.
Car 71.
I don't know, Cynthia answered.
Officer Gibson. Officer Morton.
No, ma'am. They're both dead. Another long silence.
And you're that girl doing the ride-along with him, huh?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Cynthia. Can you help me? I can't get out of the car, and the man is coming back. He's crazy.
Honey, Cynthia, child, I need you to listen to something real ugly, and I really don't have time to sugarcoat this, so I need you to pay attention. We are not coming to help you. No one is. You are in an area temporarily designated as Code Crimson, and there's nothing we can do about it.
She started getting mad. Code Crimson, I keep hearing that. What does it mean? Why won't you help me?
It's a government call sign from the DRO. It means that the imminent loss of life for first responders outweighs any assistance they could provide. Cynthia, it means that the government pulled all the law from the area, because the law is more likely to get killed than help you.
But why? What's happening here?
Baby, we don't know, but it's something real bad. So you hide, and you stay hidden until you hear the sirens. Then you know it's safe to come out.
Danny opened the door. She dropped the handset. He plopped down into the seat, and then he hung up the radio for her. And he picked up a bag of chips and started noshing from bloody fingers. The cops aren't coming, are they? He asked. She just shook her head. He giggled. Smart boys. Cops should know better than to come out when Danny's around. As Danny drove out of the hospital parking lot, he held up his wrist one final time. Cynthia folded her arms across her chest and firmly looked out the window. No. Why not? This isn't wrong, Cynthia. These are bad people. I was your age once. I was a kid. I was littler than you. And I knew a man like that. Like these people tonight, and he tried to, do sex stuff on me. I forget what happened after that. It's that hazy red I get sometimes. You know how I get. but I never saw him again. Anyway, that's what I think, that pedicures are bad people and they get what's coming to them. Pedophiles. What's that now? A pedophile is someone that does sex stuff with kids. Oh, yeah. What did I say? You said pedicure. That's when you get your toenails painted. Danny snorted. That's a dumb thing to call it. It sounds just like pedophile. He finished his Funyuns and threw the empty bag out the window. But how do you know, Danny? How do you know that they do things to kids? Did you see it? Oh, no. The man tells us. It's the man that gave me and Albert this list. The list like before, you remember. What city was that? Anyway, the man knows all about these things. The first couple of lists, Albert wasn't sure either. He was like you. So we looked, and there were pictures, and there were movies, and, I'm not super comfortable talking about that right now. It's just so ugly. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that every time we looked, we found things that I didn't want to see, so I don't look anymore. I just take the man's word for it. Cynthia stared at Danny in the rear view, and he stared back at her. His eyes were wide and pale green, and for lack of any other better term that she could come up with, innocent. No matter what actions Danny may have took, he was being quite vulnerable. He was being honest with her. He might have been a devil, but he was a sort of devil that Cynthia had never before encountered. Danny seemed to act with no malice of forethought. He was a living weapon that someone had pointed at these people, these pedophiles, and turned loose. Okay, Cynthia, just this one last stop, and we're done. I super promise. Tell me where we're going. He held up his wrist. She looked at the final address. She took a deep breath. And then she gave him the address of the apartment where her father lived. They drove through the neighborhood. Cynthia stared out the window. She saw bands of people out on the prowl. Groups and packs and murders and gangs, most in costume, others in all black, trick-or-treat bags and pillowcases filled with mischief. And backlit in the distance by fire glow that danced off the bellies of the smog banks above. The town had realized that the police were all gone and the tricksters were coming out to raise hell. As she waited in the parking lot of her father's apartment building, Cynthia found herself in turmoil. She didn't feel bad, even though she knew she should. She shouldn't be here. She certainly shouldn't have done this. And yet, she didn't feel bad, even though she knew she should. Like usual, Danny was not gone for very long. When he came back, he was freshly blooded, but looked a little distraught. Cynthia, the man in there, he had a picture on his dresser. I don't want to upset you or anything, but... And then he caught her eye in the rear view and changed his tune. You know what? Never mind. And they drove away. Danny ate some more chips, and Cynthia found herself reaching through the slider and grabbing a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos. It was the only bag that didn't have blood smeared on it. And she ate some chips too. "Where are we going now?" she asked quietly, calmly. She wasn't acting. Her fear was gone. She wasn't even anxious. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was exhaustion, but a feeling of tranquility had settled over her. "Well, I think I really need to go check on Albert. The work is all done. I guess we can just do whatever we want. Albert likes the clubs with naked ladies. I don't like those clubs. I like arcades. Do you play video games?" Cynthia responded, but she didn't remember what she said. She was lost in the night, drifting, free. They drove for a while. Danny was no longer asking directions. "I know where I'm going," he said. Although he didn't know how to find addresses, he could completely retrace the entire route he had driven that night. They stopped outside of O'Hara's pub, and Danny went inside. He didn't offer to let Cynthia out, and she didn't ask. And it wasn't Stockholm Syndrome or anything like that. She just wasn't scared. She knew, on some level, one that she would never be able to properly cast into words, that Danny wouldn't hurt her. She was safe with the boogeyman, safer than she had ever felt in her life. The real monster was dead now. And by comparison, this monster was damn near cuddly. After a few minutes, she saw Danny emerge from the bar with a big shaggy bear walking behind him. Albert, it could have been no one else, was a monster of a man, bulky and square like a refrigerator with a bushy beard dipping down over the top of his massive belly. He carried a plastic cup of beer in one hand and a half-empty glass bottle in the other. Albert chugged the beer, tossed the cup, and fished some keys from his pocket. He pointed at a beat-up pickup truck, but Danny pointed to Cynthia in the squad car. "Who's that?" "It's my friend, Cynthia." "Cynthia? Is she rich?" "No, but she reads good, and she told me everywhere I had to go. I told you that I could do it without you, and I did it without you, Albert." "Then you're more of a chump than I thought," Albert rumbled and grumbled. He chugged the rest of the glass bottle and then tossed the empty right at the cop car. It shattered across the windshield, but Cynthia didn't flinch. "Go on, Danny, let's go. We should really wait until somebody gets here. I worry about Cynthia." "No can do, pal. You know they won't come while we're here. You know that." "Oh, yeah, the Code Red thingy." "Right, Code Crimson." "Why does that happen so much, Albert?" "Because it's you, pal. You're the Code Crimson." Danny clucked. "That makes no sense. You said it's a place." "Yeah, and that place is a big fucking circle with you in the center of it. That's why we don't get pulled over no more." Danny nodded and rubbed his chin. "No, it still doesn't make any sense. But whatever." He paused, and even from that distance, from inside the squad car, Cynthia could hear his brain changing gears. "Albert, will you drive? I'm tired of driving." Danny turned and waved goodbye to her. She waved back. And then Danny and Albert piled into that beat-up pickup truck with a bed full of gas cans, and they swerved away into the fire-lit night. Cynthia sat there in the back of the car for who knows how long. She saw ghosts and goblins and skeletons dancing by, holding spray paint cans and implements of destruction. She heard shattering glass and bursting flames in the distance. Finally, what must have been hours later, just before dawn, a car pulled up alongside the police cruiser and parked. A man in a suit got out and then slid behind the wheel of the cruiser. He adjusted the wheel in the rearview mirror and slid the seat back and said, "Hello, Cynthia. I'm Bill." They drove away, and the government car followed. Before long, Cynthia realized where they were going. She said nothing, and neither did Bill, until they pulled to a stop outside of A1 Video. The fire was burned down to embers and smoke now. The 4 dead cops still lay in the street where they had fallen. Bill turned off the engine and cut the lights, and he looked at her in the rearview mirror. "It seems that you took that man to your father's house?" She stared right back at him. "It seems you took that man to 4 other houses." There was a second, just a second, where it seemed like Agent Bill might actually chuckle, but he didn't. Instead, he turned and whispered over his shoulder, "I won't tell if you won't." He opened the door and got out. "Danny never saw you tonight, did he? He killed those cops and he just took off. And you stayed here, right here, in this car for the rest of the night, right?" "Someone will be here soon. It was nice meeting you, Cynthia." He got into the government car and left. Cynthia learned a lot that night. In fact, it gave her a direction in life, something she previously lacked, a passion that she could pursue. She got serious about school with a focus on criminal psychology and profiling. When she was old enough, she changed her last name to that of her mother. Some years later, Cindy Jenkins joined the Federal Marshal Service, which in turn led her to, well, you know. Thank you for listening to another episode of A Scary Home Companion. You can find more stories about Cindy Jenkins in Night of the Long Knives and Massacre at Black Site 1. That woman has a fire in her belly that you just can't put out. As for Agent Bill and Danny and Albert, that remains to be seen. You can find the show on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or contact us directly at ascaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. Personally, I think the best way to interact with the show is by joining the Patreon. A few bucks a month gets you early episodes, video analysis, postmortems, and bonus content out the ass. Minisodes are there that provide key backstory, including a recent one about a trio of sniper nuns that, if there's any justice, should have Robert Rodriguez dialing me up any time now. A lot of this custom content is based on feedback and questions and requests that I get from my patrons. So join the cult. This episode was edited and produced by Jeff Davidson, featuring a guest voice by La'kendra Garrison. La'kendra hosts her own podcast. It's called I Just Wanna Talk, and it is not at all like this show. It is a wellspring of positivity and self-improvement. Highly recommended. Check it out on all reputable podcast platforms. Amazing music this episode, provided by Komiku, The Butcherings, Tusk Lord, Blue Dot Sessions, The Fucked Up Beat, and Chelsea Oxendine with the theme music. A Scary Home Companion is a proud member of the Imagineville, Gainesville Podcast Network. What did you do, Danny? Well, pardon my French, but I sort of cut off his, his thing. And then I put it in his mouth. That should send a message, right? What's wrong? You don't like your chips? Okay.